Tonight, we descend into the cool, ancient silence of the Catacombs of Alexandria, wandering the spiral staircases of the Shoqafa, deep beneath the earth. But first, shake off the chill of the night air. Come inside, lock the heavy oak door behind you. You are safe here in the library, protected by these walls, warm and perfectly alone. The volume for our journey is already waiting, bound in rough sandstone-coloured leather that feels cool to the touch. The firelight dances across its worn spine. Let us sink into the armchair, lift the heavy cover, and let the story begin. It was a day governed by the relentless, blinding heat of the Egyptian sun, the kind of heat that bleaches the colour from the sky and presses down upon the shoulders of the living with a heavy, stifling hand. The year was 1900, a time when Alexandria was a city dreaming of its own golden past, suspended between the salt of the Mediterranean and the dust of the desert. In the district of Caracalla, the air would have been thick with the scent of dried earth and the distant, briny tang of the sea, mingled with the sweat of labour and the slow rhythm of daily life. On this particular afternoon, the silence of history was not broken by the fanfare of trumpets or the calculated strike of a pickaxe, but by the confused and terrified braying of a donkey. It is a strange irony of our world that the greatest secrets are often whispered to the humblest among us. A donkey cart, burdened with the weight of stone, or perhaps simply weary from the journey, was picking its way across a mound of uneven ground. The earth here was treacherous, a landscape of debris and neglect. Suddenly, the solid ground simply ceased to be. There was a crumbling sound, the terrible dry noise of soil giving way, followed by a slide of loose gravel and the heavy thud of the animal falling into the void. The poor beast had stumbled not merely into a hole, but into a mouth that the earth had kept shut for nearly 2,000 years. The dust rose in a choking cloud, swirling in the shaft of sunlight that now pierced the darkness below. As the locals and the cart driver rushed to the edge of this new abyss, peering down into the gloom, they did not see just a pit. They saw the darkness staring back, cool and ancient, breathing up the scent of stale air that had not known the touch of the wind since the days of the Roman emperors. The donkey had fallen straight through the roof of time itself, discovering the main access shaft to a lost necropolis. This place, this unstable and shifting hill where the ground had proven so fragile, was known to the locals as Shoqafa. In the melodic, rolling tongue of the Arabic language, the name translates to the Mound of Shards. It is a name that holds a texture in the mouth, sharp and fragmented, hinting at the sensory reality of the surface, long before one ever ventures beneath it. If you were to walk upon this hill before that fateful day in 1900, your boots would not have crunched upon simple gravel or sand. No, every step would have been accompanied by the snap and crackle of terracotta. The surface was blanketed, layered deep with millions of fragments of broken pottery. These were not the ruins of a destroyed city, but the remnants of a ritual, a tangible echo of the grief and celebration that once took place here. In the ancient times, when the catacombs were active, families and mourners would descend to visit their dead. They would bring food and wine in clay jars and plates, sharing a meal in the presence of the departed, bridging the gap between the warm blood of the living and the cold silence of the tomb. But it was considered bad luck, a dark omen, to bring these vessels back to the land of the living. To carry a plate used in the necropolis back to one's home was to invite the shadow of death across one's own threshold. And so, for centuries, after the wine was drunk and the bread was eaten, the mourners would shatter their plates and cups upon the ground. Imagine the sound of it, the sharp clink of clay against stone, the shattering of 1,000 vessels over 1,000 years, a mountain built from the debris of farewells. The mound of shards was a physical manifestation of letting go, a graveyard of objects resting above the graveyard of souls. When you walk there in your mind, feel the unevenness under your feet, the sharp edges of red and ochre clay, the dust of broken pottery coating your skin. It was this loose, shifting layer of discarded memories that had hidden the entrance so effectively, sealing the tomb under a blanket of shattered clay, until the weight of a single donkey proved too much for the ancient roof to bear. When the first archaeologists arrived, summoned by the commotion of the accident, they stood at the precipice of this accidental discovery. We can imagine the mix of trepidation and intoxicating curiosity that must have flooded their veins. To descend into el Shoqafa is to leave the world of the sun behind completely. The transition is not gradual, it is absolute. The first descent is a spiral. One does not walk into this tomb, one winds down into it, like water circling a drain. The primary shaft is a rotunda, a circular well of shadow where a spiral staircase hugs a central pillar. As the archaeologist placed his boot on the first worn stone step, the heat of the Alexandrian afternoon would have vanished instantly, replaced by a chill that seeps through the fabric of clothes and settles into the marrow. The air here is heavy, still, and silent. It is not the empty silence of a room, but the pressurized silence of deep earth, the kind of quiet that rings in the ears. With every turn of the spiral staircase, the light from above grows fainter, turning from a blinding white circle to a pale, distant eye, until finally it is gone. The lanterns would have been lit, their flames flickering nervously in the stagnant draught. The smell is distinct, a mixture of damp limestone, the mineral tang of the earth, and the faint, almost sweet scent of decay that lingers even after centuries. Shadows stretch and twist against the curved walls of the rotunda, dancing with the movement of the descent. The staircase was designed not just for humans, but for the transport of the deceased. The central pillar has openings, windows into the shaft, allowing bodies to be lowered down the center on ropes while the mourners walk the spiral stairs around them. As the first explorers descended, they were walking in the footsteps of the grieving, tracing the same path that thousands had taken before, spiraling down towards the inevitable. The walls of the shaft seemed to close in, the weight of the hill above pressing down, a reminder that they were intruders in a domain meant only for the dead. Upon reaching the bottom of the spiral, the silence of the first level opens up. It is a vestibule of shadows. Here the architecture shifts from the purely functional to the ceremonial. The fear in those first moments comes from the unknown scale of the labyrinth. The lantern light would catch the edges of carvings, the unexpected fusion of Egyptian and Roman symbols, a serpent with the head of a deity, a Roman soldier with the soul of a pharaoh. The darkness stretches out into corridors that seem to have no end, whispering with the draughts that move through the hollowed-out veins of the rock. It was a city beneath the city, a mirror world of silence waiting to be read, one sherd, one step, one whisper at a time. Having descended the spiral, leaving the blinding white heat of the surface world far behind, we step away from the rotunda and move deeper into the hill's stone heart. To the left of the central lobby, a low doorway beckons. It is an invitation to a space that feels startlingly, almost uncomfortably human amidst the cold geometry of the dead. We have entered the Triclinium. In the language of the Romans, a triclinium is a dining room, a place of social gathering and sustenance. But here, buried deep within the bedrock of Alexandria, the word takes on a heavy, solemn cadence. This is the hall of the banquet. The air here is still, trapped in a pocket of eternal waiting. If you close your eyes, you can almost smell the phantom scents of the past, the sharp, metallic tang of oxidized bronze lamps, the smoke of burning oil, and the sweet, cloying aroma of incense meant to mask the damp, earthen breath of the tomb. The room is not large, but it is intimate. It is carved directly out of the living rock, a testament to the sheer determination of the masons who chipped away at the darkness to create a space for the living to commune with the dead. 3 wide stone benches are hewn from the walls, arranged in a U shape around a central square. This arrangement tells us exactly how the mourners positioned themselves. They did not sit upright in chairs as we might today. No, following the customs of some Greco-Roman world, they reclined. They would lean on their left elbows, their bodies draped in linen, facing the center, forming a circle of intimacy. Imagine the stone beneath them. It is rough and cold to the touch, a stark reminder of the grave. But on the days of the pranzo funebre, the funeral meal, these hard benches would have been softened. Families brought cushions, thick rugs, and tapestries, layering them over the rock to create a semblance of comfort. The flickering light of oil lamps placed in small niches along the walls would cast long, dancing shadows, making the carved pillars seem to tremble. In this low light, the grim reality of the catacomb was softened, transformed into a twilight parlor where the boundary between the living and the deceased became thin and permeable. This was not merely a wake, it was a ritual of sustenance known as the refrigerium. The word itself whispers of cooling, of refreshment, a reprieve from the scorching heat of the afterlife. The ancients believed that the journey through the underworld was arduous, dry, and terrifying. The soul, separated from the body, wandered in a parched land, thirsty and weary, and so the living descended to provide relief. Picture a family gathering here in the year 150. They unpack baskets woven from river reeds. They bring out loaves of bread, dense and coarse, perhaps flavored with coriander or cumin. They unseal amphorae of wine, the red liquid dark as blood in the dim light. But they do not eat alone. The guest of honor is the invisible presence among them. The ritual required sharing. A portion of the food was not eaten but offered. Wine was not just drunk, it was poured out. In some parts of these catacombs there are holes drilled into the rock, libation tubes that lead directly down to the graves below. Can you hear the sound of it? The glug of wine being poured into the dark throat of the earth, the splash as it hits the dust or the sarcophagus beneath. It was a way to physically transmit moisture to the dry soul, to say, "We are here, we remember, drink and be cooled." The atmosphere during these feasts was likely a complex tapestry of emotions. There would be the low murmur of conversation, the breaking of bread, perhaps even quiet laughter as memories were shared. The clinking of cups would echo softly against the low ceiling. It was a sensory overload in a place of sensory deprivation. The taste of the wine would be sharper here, the sweetness of dates or figs more intense against the backdrop of death's sterility. They were eating in the belly of the earth, asserting their vitality in the face of inevitable decay. But there is a quieter, more subtle purpose to this room, one that speaks to the psychological needs of the bereaved. The layout of the Triclinium was designed to mimic the dining rooms of the great villas above ground. It was an intentional architectural mirror. By replicating the domestic sphere, the builders were trying to domesticate death. To leave a loved one alone in the cold dark is a terrifying thought. It haunts the human heart. So they created a cozy extension of the family home. By making the tomb look like a house, by filling it with the familiar sounds of dining and the smells of a home-cooked meal, they were trying to convince themselves, and perhaps the spirit of the departed, that this was simply a new residence, a shadow home. When the meal was finished and the lamps burned low, the transition back to the surface must have been jarring. But before they left, they would perform that final act we spoke of earlier, the shattering of the pottery. The plates they ate from, now charged with the energy of the underworld, could not return to the sunlight. They were smashed, adding to the layers of the mound above, a final crescendo of sound before the silence reclaimed the hall. The triclinium stands empty now. The cushions are gone. The wine has long since evaporated. But the stone benches remain, worn smooth by the bodies of thousands of mourners who came here to eat, to drink, and to whisper to the dark that they had not forgotten. It is a room that holds the memory of love's stubborn refusal to say goodbye, leaving the flickering warmth of the triclinium, where the ghosts of feasts past still seem to linger in the air. We turn our backs on the semblance of the living world. The path forward does not lead us home. It leads only deeper into the true heart of the mountain silence. We stand now at the top of a second descent, a staircase that feels less like a construction of man and more like a natural fissure in the earth, widened and tamed by the chisel. This is the great staircase of the vestibule. As you take the first step, the ceiling seems to lower, pressing down with the immense weight of the limestone hill above. The air here changes character once again. In the banquet hall, the air was stagnant, yes, but it held the memory of warmth. Here, in the throat of the tomb, the air is cold and mineral, tasting of wet stone and the deep, ageless dust that settles in places where the wind never reaches. The descent is steep. With each step you are moving not just physically down, but chronologically backward, away from the Roman sunlight of the 2nd century and into a darkness that feels primordial. The walls are rough-hewn here, stripping away the domestic illusion of the dining hall. You are entering the domain of the chthonic gods, the gods of the earth and the underworld. The sensation is one of being swallowed. The shadows stretch long and distorted ahead of you, pooling at the bottom of the stairs where a grand architectural facade waits in the gloom, illuminated only by the fragile halo of your lantern. At the foot of these stairs we do not find a simple door. We find a temple. Buried here, hidden from the sky, the architects carved a facade that would not look out of place on the streets of ancient Athens or Thebes. Yet it exists. In a cavern of eternal night, 2 columns rise up to support a heavy pediment, framing the entrance to the principal burial chamber. But it is not the columns that draw the eye. It is the guardians. Flanking the entrance, standing as eternal sentinels against the encroaching dark, are 2 massive carved serpents. These are not merely decorative snakes. They are the agathos daimon, the good spirits. In the flickering torchlight, their scales seem to ripple, carved with such texture that one expects them to slither against the rock. They are coiled in a posture of aggressive defense, their bodies thick and powerful, rising up as if ready to strike anyone who dares to disturb the sleep of the masters within. Look closely at them in your mind's eye. They are the perfect embodiment of the Library of Whispers, for they speak two languages at once. They are a fusion, a whisper of two worlds colliding. Their bodies are the cobras of Egypt, the uraeus that protected the pharaohs, spitting fire at the enemies of the sun god Ra. But upon their heads they do not wear a simple hood. They wear the pshent, the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, marking them as royalty, as sovereign protectors of this domain. Yet, look at what rests within the curve of their coils. It is here that the Roman whisper enters. To the right, the serpent cradles the caduceus, the winged staff of Hermes. In Greek and Roman mythology, Hermes was the psychopomp, the guide of souls who led the dead safely to the underworld. To the left, the other serpent guards the thyrsus, a staff topped with a pine cone, the symbol of Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of wine, yes, but also of ecstasy and rebirth, of the chaotic life force that defies death. So here, in the dark, the Egyptian cobra holds the symbols of Greek gods. It is a visual prayer carved in stone. It says, "May you be protected like a pharaoh, may you be guided by Hermes, and may you find rebirth through Dionysus." The fear one might feel staring at these monstrous guardians is tempered by their meaning. They are not there to trap the soul, but to keep the chaos of the outside world at bay. They are the gatekeepers of peace. Above them, on the lintel, a winged sun disk hovers, flanked by falcons, another ancient Egyptian symbol of divine protection, watching over the threshold with unblinking eyes. Passing between these silent, coiled sentinels, we step through the gate and into the sanctum sanctorum, the Holy of Holies. We have arrived in the principal burial chamber. The transition is striking. We have moved from the rough, naturalistic feeling of the descent into a space of rigid, sculpted perfection. The chaos of the earth has been ordered into geometry. The chamber is arranged like a triclinium for the dead. It is a square room, and in 3 of its walls, heavy stone sarcophagi are hewn directly from the bedrock. These are not freestanding coffins that can be moved or carried. They are part of the mountain itself. The lids are carved in the shape of beds, mimicking the dining couches we saw earlier, as if the dead are merely resting, reclining eternally at a banquet of silence. The architecture here creates a profound sense of enclosure. The ceiling is vaulted, giving the impression of a sky made of stone. The walls are decorated with reliefs that, once again, blur the lines between the Nile and the Tiber. We see figures that stand in the stiff profile pose of ancient Egyptian art, yet they wear the heavy, draped togas of Roman citizens. They offer lotus flowers and jars of water to deities who look like Osiris, but stand with the contrapposto weight shift of a Greek statue. The sound in this chamber is different. It is deadened, absorbed by the mass of the rock. A whisper here does not echo, it drops straight to the floor. It is a space designed for the finality of rest. The three niches, or loculi here, were likely used for the primary burials of the wealthy family that commissioned this tomb. Over time, as generations passed, more bodies were added, the chamber filling with the silent congregation of a single lineage. Standing in the center of this room, surrounded by the 3 stone beds, the feeling is not one of horror, but of a strange, heavy comfort. The coziness of the upper dining hall has been transmuted here into a permanent embrace. The earth holds these sleepers tight. The carved serpents outside ensure that no noise from the city of the living, no cartwheels, no shouting merchants, no braying donkeys, will ever penetrate this deep. It is a sanctuary of absolute stillness, a stone womb where the soul, guided by Hermes and protected by the agathos daimon, can wait out the long, dreamless night of eternity. If we stand very still in the center of the principal burial chamber, allowing the silence to settle like dust upon our shoulders, our eyes begin to adjust to the gloom. The lantern light, fragile and trembling, washes over the limestone walls. At first glance, the carvings seem familiar, the standard hieroglyphs and figures one expects to find in the land of the pharaohs. But as we step closer, leaning in until we can almost feel the cold breath of the stone on our cheeks, a strange and unsettling realization takes hold. The world carved here is wrong. It is a visual whisper that stutters between 2 languages. We turn our gaze to the figure of Anubis. In the ancient texts, he is the jackal, the lord of the sacred land, the opener of the ways. We expect to see him as he has been depicted for 3,000 years, a lithe, bare-chested figure with the head of a canine, wearing the shendit kilt, walking with the stiff, eternal grace of the Nile Valley. But look at him here. The head is indeed the jackal, the long snout, the alert, pointed ears, the animal eyes staring into the void. These are purely Egyptian, but the body has been colonized. This Anubis does not wear the kilt of a pharaoh's servant. He is dressed in the garb of a Roman soldier or a high-ranking official. He wears a tunic, a heavy Roman cuirass, and laced military boots. Over his shoulder is draped a toga, the fabric carved in deep, heavy folds that suggest the weight of wool rather than the lightness of Egyptian linen. It is a visual shock, an uncanny fusion that defies the logic of history. It is as if a Roman legionary has donned the mask of an Egyptian god, or perhaps the god has disguised himself to walk unnoticed through the streets of Rome. He stands in a relaxed contrapposto pose, his weight shifted to one leg, his hip jutting out, a posture of casual humanity invented by the Greeks, imposed upon a god who was never meant to be human. He holds a large shield, not the tapered shield of the Nile, but the oval scutum of the Roman auxiliary. Yet, in his other hand, he does not hold a sword. He grips a golden disc, perhaps a tambourine used in the mysteries of Isis, or perhaps a shield of magic. This image, this Anubis in a toga, is the stone embodiment of a confused identity. It captures the precise moment when one culture bleeds into another, creating a hybrid that belongs to neither and both. The carving is not just art, it is a document of a world in flux, frozen in the limestone. Turning slightly, the light catches another figure, a goddess who watches over the sarcophagi with a gaze of infinite patience. Here, the blending of the divine becomes even more fluid, more dreamlike. We see a woman. She stands with wings outstretched, the feathers carved with such delicate precision that they seem soft to the touch, ready to rustle in the stagnant air. Who is she? The wings tell us she is Isis, the Great Mother, the protector of the dead who beat her wings to breathe life back into her husband Osiris. But look at her crown. She wears the solar disk framed by cow horns, the ancient symbol of Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and the sky. In the Egyptian mind, Hathor and Isis had long begun to merge, but here there is a third spirit present. The drapery of her dress does not cling to her form in the Egyptian style. It billows and pools around her feet in the complex, chaotic folds of Hellenistic sculpture. She holds a torch, a symbol not native to Isis, but central to the cult of Demeter, the Greek goddess of the harvest who searched the underworld for her lost daughter Persephone. This is the Isis-Hathor-Demeter connection. In the mind of the mourner standing here 2 millennia ago, these were not 3 separate goddesses. They were one universal mother, whether you called her Isis in the temples of the Nile or Demeter in the shrines of Eleusis. She was the one who mourned, the one who searched, the one who protected the dead child. The artist has carved her holding the feather of truth, Ma'at in one hand, and the torch of Greek mystery in the other. It is a desperate, beautiful attempt to cover all bases. The sensory effect of this relief is one of overwhelming maternal protection. The
wings seem to wrap around the entire chamber, turning the cold tomb into a cradle. The fusion of symbols creates a deity who is more powerful than the sum of her parts, a super goddess capable of navigating both the Egyptian Duat and the Greek Hades. But why? Why this elaborate visual confusion? To understand, we must step into the mind of the family who commissioned this tomb. We must imagine the silent negotiations that took place in their hearts. They were likely a wealthy family, culturally Roman or thoroughly Hellenized. They spoke Greek, they wore Roman clothes, they lived by Roman laws, but they lived in Alexandria, on the edge of the great African desert. They knew that in this land it was the ancient gods of Egypt who held the keys to eternity. The Romans had conquered the land, yes, but they had not conquered death. In the face of the great silence, Roman pragmatism crumbled. Imagine the patriarch of the family standing in this chamber while it was being carved. He is a man of the world, rational and powerful, but he is afraid. He worries that if he is buried with only Roman rites, the Egyptian gods of the soil might reject him. What if Anubis does not recognize a man in a toga? What if Osiris turns his back on a soul that does not know the spells? And so a negotiation takes place. It is a spiritual hedge. They decide to adopt the local customs, but they cannot let go of who they are. They dress Anubis in a toga to make him familiar, to make him one of us. They give him a Roman uniform so that when he comes to collect the soul, he looks like a friend, a protector, not a monster. It is a form of camouflage. The family is saying to the universe, we respect the old gods, but we are Romans. Please accept us as we are. The reliefs are a prayer for safe passage across a border that no map can show. They are trying to smuggle their Roman identities into the Egyptian afterlife. The silence of the chamber preserves this anxiety. Every chisel mark is a testament to the fear of the unknown. They built a bridge between their culture and the ancient magic of the soil, hoping that it would be strong enough to carry them across the abyss. As we look at the strange hybrid gods, we do not see heresy. We see the very human, very timeless desire to be safe, to be known, and to be welcomed home, no matter how strange the new country of death might be. We remain in the heart of the principal burial chamber, where the air is thick with the dust of 2 millennia, and the silence is absolute. Having studied the walls where gods merge and cultures blur, our gaze now drops to the floor, to the very purpose of this hollowed-out sanctum. Dominating the small square room are 3 massive shapes, heavy and imposing in the gloom. These are the vessels of eternity. According to the outline of history you have provided, we are looking at stone that does not belong here. The walls are soft, local limestone, the skeletal remains of ancient marine life, compressed into the hills of Alexandria. But the sarcophagi themselves are different. They are hewn from red Aswan granite. To understand the weight of this presence, you must close your eyes and travel south, far up the winding ribbon of the Nile, past the temples of Luxor, past the Valley of the Kings, to the very edge of the ancient Egyptian world. Aswan is a place of heat, where the sun strikes the earth like a hammer, and the river boils against black rocks. It is there, in the quarries that served the pharaohs for 3,000 years, that this stone was born,
Reach out with your mind and feel the texture of red granite. It is not like the chalky, porous limestone that crumbles under a fingernail. It is hard, cold, and smooth as glass when polished. It is speckled with quartz and feldspar, tiny constellations of black and white trapped in a sea of deep, dried blood red. It is a stone that speaks of permanence. It is a stone that refuses to die. The effort to bring these 3 blocks here, to this hidden chamber beneath the earth, is a staggering thought. Imagine the blocks being cut from the living rock of the south, the sound of bronze and iron chisels ringing out in the desert heat. Imagine them loaded onto heavy barges, floating down the Nile for hundreds of miles, a slow, solemn procession of weight moving north towards the sea. And then the descent. How did they lower these immense tons of rock down the spiral staircase? Or perhaps they were placed here first, lowered into the open shaft before the roof was closed and the hill was piled high with shards. They sit now in their niches, immovable, anchoring the room with the gravity of a collapsed star. They are the red hearts of the mountain, beating with a slow geological rhythm. But as we draw closer, holding our lantern high to inspect the resting places of the masters, we encounter a riddle. The outline speaks of sealed tombs, yet here we face the mystery of the lids. In the ideal vision of the afterlife, the sarcophagus is a vault. The heavy lid is placed on top. The seam is sealed with mortar or lead, and the occupant is left in total darkness, safe from the eyes of the living and the ravages of time. But here the narrative is interrupted. We look at the rims of the great red boxes, and we find questions instead of answers. Are the lids missing? Were they pried off by grave robbers centuries ago, thieves who braved the curse of the Agathos diamond serpents to snatch gold amulets from the throats of the dead? If so, the violence of that act has left no mark. The edges are not chipped or shattered as one might expect from a frantic looting. Or is the truth more melancholy? Is it possible that the lids were never finished? Perhaps the family, for all their wealth and power, ran out of time. Death often arrives before the preparations are complete. We can imagine the master mason in the workshop above, his chisel poised over the final block of granite, only to receive word that the funeral must happen now. The stone remains unpolished, the seal uncast. The dead were laid to rest in open boxes exposed to the damp air of the shaft, waiting for a closure that never came. There is a profound vulnerability in an open sarcophagus. It is like a sentence left unfinished, a door left ajar in a storm. The darkness of the room pours into the stone box, filling the space where the body should be. It suggests that the transition to the afterlife was not the smooth, hermetic seal the rituals promised, but something messier, something interrupted by the chaos of reality. So, who were they? Who were the people intended for these 3 grand red cradles? The tomb provides no names. There are no cartouches carved into the granite, no biographical inscriptions boasting of titles or deeds. The anonymity is almost aggressive, but the very existence of this chamber allows us to dream of them. We can surmise they were high-ranking Alexandrians. Only the immensely wealthy could afford to hollow out a mountain and import granite from the cataracts of the Nile. They were the elite of the 2nd century, the bridge generation. Perhaps the central sarcophagus held the patriarch, a man who walked the colonnaded streets of Alexandria wearing a Roman toga, but who secretly prayed to Osiris in the dark. He might have been a grain merchant controlling the flow of wheat from Egypt to Rome, his wealth built on the fertility of the river. Or perhaps a priest of the Serapeion, a man who understood the deep philosophical blending of the gods. To his right, perhaps his wife, a woman who wore the silks of the East and the perfumes of Arabia, who organized the banquet in the Triclinium above, ensuring that the guests had wine and cushions. Did she fear the descent? Did she find comfort in the sight of the protective serpents at the door, and the third, a son, a brother? Or perhaps it was left empty, a spare room in the house of death, waiting for a tragedy that the family hoped would never come. They lie here in the center of the labyrinth, their bones long since turned to dust, their names erased by the wind. But they achieved a different kind of immortality. They did not become stars in the sky as the pharaohs hoped. Instead, they became a mystery. They became the whisper in the ear of every traveler who descends the spiral stairs. We do not know who they were, but we know what they feared, what they loved, and how desperately they tried to hold on to existence in the face of the inevitable. The red granite holds the cold. The missing lids hold the silence. And in the space between, the spirits of the unknown masters of Shoqafa continue their eternal, restless sleep. We leave the heavy red silence of the granite sarcophagi behind us. We step away from the intimate, carefully negotiated theology of the private family tomb and move into a different kind of darkness. The corridor widens, stretching out into the gloom, and the architecture shifts. The elaborate carvings of gods in togas fade away. The serpents and the winged discs vanish. In their place, we find something starker, simpler, and profoundly moving in its uniformity. We have entered what history calls the Hall of Caracalla. To the eyes of a casual observer, this space might seem like a mere expansion, a utilitarian addition carved out when the main chambers were full. But if we listen to the whisper of the stone, we understand that we have walked into a different purpose entirely. If the upper room was a manor house for the dead, this is a barracks. The walls here are honeycombed. Row upon row of rectangular niches, known as loculi, are cut into the limestone. They are not deep, just deep enough to cradle a human form. They are not wide, just wide enough for shoulders that once bore the weight of the world. There is no chaotic jumble here, no disorder. The niches are arranged with a geometric precision, a disciplined grid that stretches into the shadows. This is the barracks of eternal sleep. The legends of Alexandria tell us of a time of great fire and fury in the year 215. They speak of the Emperor Caracalla and a day when the streets of the city ran red. But here, deep beneath the earth, the noise of that day has been silenced. We do not see the violence of the sword. We see only the peace of the aftermath. We see the moment when the fighting is done, when the noise of the drill sergeant and the roar of the crowd have finally ceased. Imagine the young men who lie here. History tells us they were likely soldiers, or perhaps the youth of the city who stood together in those final moments. But in this hall, rank and insignia no longer matter. Close your eyes and try to feel the atmosphere of a barracks at night after a long, grueling march. The air is heavy with the scent of exhaustion, but also with the comfort of rest. That is the feeling preserved in this stone. Think of the sensation of removing armor, the relief of unbuckling the heavy leather straps of the lorica, the cuirass that restricted the breath, the sharp clatter of the heavy shield, the scutum being leaned against the wall for the last time, the loosening of the sandals, the caligae from dusty, tired feet. Here, in these niches, that moment of relief is stretched out into eternity. They are not thrown into the earth. They are tucked in. Each niche is a bunk. The soldiers have washed the dust of the parade ground from their faces. They have laid down their spears. They have turned their backs on the blinding sun of the empire and the demands of their commanders. Here, they are simply men again. As we walk past the rows of loculi, the lantern light flickering over the dark openings, we can almost hear the phantom sounds of a sleeping camp, the rhythmic breathing of 100 men, the shifting of a body seeking a comfortable spot on the stone, the quiet camaraderie of those who have served together and now rest together. There is a profound dignity in this repetition. In the main chamber, the wealthy sought to preserve their individuality with statues and painted names. Here, the individuality is surrendered for the brotherhood of the line. They sleep as they lived, in formation, shoulder to shoulder, a shield wall of silence against the encroaching dark. It is said that alongside the humans, the bones of horses were found in this section of the catacomb. This detail adds a layer of poignant softness to the grim stone. Imagine the war horses, those great beasts of muscle and fire, who charged at the sound of the trumpet. They too have been released from their service. No more the bite of the iron bit in the mouth, no more the stinging crack of the whip, no more the terror of the clash. The horses sleep beside their riders. In the quiet of the hall of Caracalla, One can almost smell the scent of hay and warm animal fur, a rustic, earthy perfume that mingles with the dry limestone, the riders and their mounts united in the final truce. The massacre of 215 was a storm that tore through the city above. It was noise, confusion, scream, and fire. But the earth is a mother who creates order from chaos. She took those broken young men, those tired soldiers, and she gave them this room. She gave them the orderliness of the drill, but without the pain of the duty. There is no fear here. The mass grave is not a pit of horror. It is a dormitory. It is a place where the watch has ended. The sentries have been relieved of their posts. The night is long, yes, infinite perhaps, but it is peaceful. As you stand in the center of the hall, surrounded by the hundreds of silent niches, do not think of the emperor who ordered their death. His dust and his anger is forgotten. Think instead of the quiet that comes after the armor is dropped. Think of the cool stone against a fevered brow. Think of the peace of a soldier who knows that finally there are no more wars to fight. They are resting in their rows, safe in the barracks of the deep, waiting for a dawn that need not ever come. We have walked the spiral path of the mourners and stood in the silent barracks of the soldiers. We have marveled at the gods who wear the masks of two nations. But now, let us extinguish the grand lamps of the priests and the wealthy patrons. Let us light a smaller, simpler flame. Let us lower our gaze from the high ceilings and the painted reliefs to look at the stone itself, to the rough, unpolished corners that the tour guides ignore. Here, in the shadows, we find the ghosts of the men who made this place. We are speaking of the craftsmen, the excavators, the stone cutters. To build a city for the dead beneath the earth is an act of violent subtraction. Before this was a hall, it was solid rock. It was a dense, crushing weight of limestone that had slept undisturbed for eons. The creation of Shoqafa was not a miracle of magic. It was a miracle of sweat. It was the result of patient, agonizing labor, measured not in hours, but in inches. Close your eyes and try to hear the true soundtrack of this construction. It is a rhythmic, metallic heartbeat. Clink, clink, clink. It is the sound of an iron chisel biting into stone. Day after day, year after year, the air in these tunnels would have been thick with a fine white powder. It coated the lungs, it settled in the hair, it turned the skin of the workers into the colour of ghosts long before they ever died. The atmosphere would have been stiflingly hot, a humid trap where the heat of human exertion had nowhere to go. The smell was not of incense, but of wet rock and the sour, honest scent of men working in the dark. Imagine the physical sensation of the tunnel. You are kneeling in a crawl space, the ceiling scraping your back. You hold a heavy wooden mallet in one hand, the wood polished smooth by the oils of your palm. In the other, the iron chisel, its tip blunted by the relentless geology of Alexandria. You strike. The shock wave travels up your arm, settling as a dull ache in the shoulder. You strike again. A flake of stone falls. You have moved forward by a fraction of a finger's width. This was a work of immense claustrophobia. The workers were carving their own temporary tombs, trusting that the roof would not collapse, trusting that the air would not run out. They were the first to breathe this stale air, the first to see the darkness retreat before the lamp. They were the pioneers of the abyss. But it is in the imperfections that we truly meet them. If you look closely at the walls of the corridors, away from the central chambers, the illusion of perfection shatters. The slick professional facade of the afterlife slips, and we see the trembling hand of the human. We find the errors. In some sections of the catacomb, the walls are not smooth. They are rough, carrying the chaotic hatch marks of the pickaxe, like wounds that never healed. These are the places where the money ran out, or where the urgency of death overtook the patience of the craft. We can see where a mason started a line, intending to carve a straight cornice only to veer off. We can see where a relief was begun, the outline of a leg, the curve of a shield, and then abandoned, left as a ghost of an idea in the rock. There are spots where the symmetry fails, a niche that is slightly too small, a pillar that leans just a degree too far to the left. These are not failures, they are signatures. They remind us that this terrifyingly complex labyrinth was built by people who got tired, people whose hands shook after a 10-hour shift, people who made mistakes. Sometimes we can even find the faint traces of red ochre paint on the walls. These were the guideline, the ancient blueprint sketched by the master architect to show the cutters where to dig. They were meant to be carved away, erased by the final product. But in the forgotten corners, they remain. Red lines in the dark. They are a frozen moment of planning, a to-do list that has lasted for 2,000 years. Seeing them feels like an intrusion, like looking over the shoulder of an artist before the paint is dry. It makes the ancient world feel startlingly, uncomfortably present. And what of the world above? These men lived in a liminal state, suspended between the sunlit chaos of Alexandria and the silent order of the tomb, as they worked deep in the shaft, carving out the Triclinium or the hall of Caracalla. Sound would have been their only connection to the life they had left behind. The catacomb is deep, but it is not sealed. The central shaft, that great rotunda, acts as a funnel for sound. Pause for a moment and listen with the ears of a stonecutter in the year 180. You are deep in the cool dark. The only sound is the rasp of your own breath. But then, drifting down from the circle of light far above, comes a muffled, distorted echo, It might be the rumble of a heavy cart passing on the dirt road, the wooden wheels groaning under a load of amphorae. It might be the distant rhythmic chanting of a priest in a surface temple, or the sharp bark of a street dog. On windy days, perhaps the faint, salty roar of the Mediterranean Sea, crashing against the harbour walls miles away, would filter down as a low vibration in the stone. These sounds were reminders of the prize. They were the sounds of the meal waiting at home, of the wine shop, of the sun. The workers were the bridge builders. They stood in the grave so that others could walk in the light. They carved the fear out of the rock, turning the terrifying unknown into a series of tidy square rooms. They used tools that are remarkably similar to what we might find in a workshop today. Iron chisels of various widths, heavy mallets of acacia wood, pickaxes for the rough clearing, baskets woven from palm fronds to haul away the tons of debris, basket by heavy basket, up the spiral stairs, the weariness of that climb, to haul the weight of the mountain up towards the sky, only to turn around and descend again. Once they finished their work, when the final sarcophagus was polished and the last layer of plaster was painted, they packed up their tools and left. They left the silence behind them, but they left something of themselves too. The energy of their labor is trapped in the walls. The atmosphere we feel today, that heavy, solemn mood, is not just the presence of death. It is the residual echo of 1,000,000 strikes of the hammer. It is the concentrated will of the craftsman who looked at a solid hill and said, "We will make a space here. We revere the dead who inhabit the niches, but let us spare a whisper for the living who carved the niches, for the hands that bled so the souls could rest. They are the invisible hosts of Shoqafa, the silent partners in this grand architecture of eternity. We have explored the dry, dusty avenues where the stonecutters toiled, and we have stood before the red granite of the masters. But now we must descend even further, not just in space, but in elements. We leave the domain of dry rock and enter the domain of the liquid dark. In the shadows of the catacomb, hidden away from the grand reliefs and the painted gods, lie the cisterns. It is easy to forget, amidst the romance of the afterlife, that the rituals of death are performed by the living, and the living are fragile creatures. They are bodies of heat and blood that require sustenance. Imagine the journey of the mourners on the day of a funeral. They have walked from the white city of Alexandria under the merciless gaze of the sun god Ra. They are coated in the dust of the road, their throats parched, their skin radiating the heat of the surface world. To descend into the tomb is a relief, yes, but it is also a physical trial. The cisterns were not an accident of geology. They were a necessity of the ritual. The architects, in their wisdom, understood that one cannot honor the dead with unclean hands. Before the banquet in the Triclinium could begin, Before the bread was broken or the wine poured, there had to be purification. Picture the scene. A mourner steps away from the crowd, finding a quiet alcove where the water is stored. They dip a ladle, or perhaps a cupped hand, into the dark, still surface. The water is shockingly cold. It has been held in the embrace of the earth, shielded from the evaporation of the sun. As they splash it onto their face and hands, the sensation is one of shock and awakening. The dust of the journey turns to mud and washes away. It was a moment of transition. With the water, they washed away the noise of the city, the grime of the market, the trivial worries of the day. They made themselves clean, physically and spiritually, preparing to stand in the presence of the ancestors. The water was a threshold. On one side, the chaotic world of the living, on the other, the silent, consecrated air of the tomb. But the water here is more than just a utility for thirst or hygiene. In the Egyptian mind, water is never just water. It is a god. It is the blood of the land. Even here, buried deep in the bedrock, cut off from the sky, the connection to the Nile is profound. To the ancients, the Nile was not merely a river that flowed on the surface. It was a force that permeated the entire world, flowing beneath the earth in the secret channels of the Duat, the underworld. The water in these cisterns was seen as a vein of that great celestial river. By drinking from it, by washing in it, the mourners were linking themselves to the cycle of Osiris. Osiris, the god of the dead, was often associated with the cool, dark waters of the deep earth, the water that brings life out of death. The rising of the Nile was the resurrection of the god. Therefore, the water in the catacomb was holy. It was the liquid promise that death is not an end, but a change of state. Look into the water of the cistern in the dim light of a flickering oil lamp. The surface acts as a perfect obsidian mirror. It reflects the carved ceiling, the dancing shadows, and the face of the mourner looking down. It is a portal. For a moment, the living look into the dark water and see themselves suspended in the void, floating between the worlds. It is a reminder that they, too, are fluid, that their time is flowing away like the river to the sea. And as we descend to the very lowest level of Kom el Shoqafa, the lowest of the three tiers, the nature of this water shifts again. Here, the hand of man gives way to the power of nature. The lowest level is often inaccessible to us now, reclaimed by the rising water table. It has become a sunken world, but if you stand at the edge of the darkness, where the stairs disappear into the murky pool, you can experience the most profound sound in the entire necropolis. Silence. But it is not an empty silence. It is a silence that has a texture, a weight. It is thick and heavy, pressing against the eardrums. And then it is broken. Plip. A single drop of water falls from the limestone ceiling and strikes the surface of the flooded chamber below. Wait for it. The seconds stretch out. 1, 2, 3, plip. It is the heartbeat of the mountain. It is the sound of time eroding eternity. In the profound quiet of these depths, that tiny sound rings out like a bell. It echoes off the wet walls, a lonely, melancholy note that travels up the shaft, a whisper from the deep. This dripping is the only movement in a place designed for stillness. While the bones in the loculi turn to dust and the paint on the walls fades, the water continues its slow, patient work. It seeps through the capillaries of the rock, gathering on the stalactites, growing heavy and falling. It is a clock that needs no winding. The lower level is a reminder that the earth always reclaims its own. The architects fought to carve out a dry space to hold back the weight of the hill, but the water is patient. It waits in the dark. It rises inch by inch, century by century, drowning the stairs, filling the chambers, turning the tomb back into a cave. Standing there, listening to that rhythmic dripping, you feel a deep, primal calm. It is the sound of the womb and the grave. It is the sound of the primordial ocean, none, from which the world rose and to which it will eventually return. The mourners are gone. The priests are gone. The donkeys and the soldiers are gone. But the water remains. Plip. It is the final whisper of Kom el Shoqafa. A whisper that says, everything flows, everything returns. Peace is found in the deep. The desert is a patient creature. It does not hunt. It waits. It watches cities rise with the vanity of stone and marble, and it knows that eventually they will all belong to the sand. For Kom el Shoqafa, the end did not come with a scream or a sudden cataclysm. It came with the slow, soft hiss of the wind, after the architects had packed away their chisels and the last priests had chanted their final hymns. The forces of nature began their long reclamation. Alexandria stands at the edge of the great African void, and the wind that blows from the south, the hot, dry Kamasin, carries the desert on its back. Imagine the first year of neglect. The entrance shaft, that great circular mouth that swallowed the sunlight, began to gather dust. It started as a fine, golden film coating the spiral stairs. Then, as the seasons turned, the film became a layer. Leaves from the surface, debris from the city, and the relentless drifting sand began to fill the rotunda. The wind acted like a sweeper, pushing the earth into the hole, grain by tiny grain. It was a burial of the burial place. The pottery shards that covered the hill, the mound of shards, were slowly interred under fresh soil. The sharp edges of the broken plates were softened by the accumulating dust. The distinct features of the hill began to blur, flattening out under the weight of the centuries. The entrance, once a busy portal between the worlds, became a depression in the ground, then a dip, and finally just another patch of scrubby, uneven earth. Down below, the air grew stagnant. Without the movement of bodies to stir it, the atmosphere settled into a heavy, suffocating stillness. The shafts of light that used to pierce the gloom during the day were choked off as the openings above were clogged with debris. The catacomb was being sealed, not by a door, but by the land itself. It was a slow suffocation. The darkness became absolute, a thick, velvety blackness that pressed against the eyes, unbroken by even a single photon of light. While the sand was conquering the physical space, a different kind of erasure was happening in the minds of the people above. The world was changing. The old gods, the hybrid deities who had ruled Alexandria for so long, were dying. The rise of Christianity was not just a change of temples, it was a shift in the very geometry of the soul, the complex syncretic mix that created Shoqafa, the idea that one could be Roman and Egyptian, that Anubis could wear a toga and Isis could hold a Greek torch, began to fade. To the new eyes of the Byzantine era, these images were not comforting bridges to the afterlife. They were confusing pagan relics. They were demons of the old world. The rituals of the refrigerium, the sharing of food with the dead, fell out of favor. The idea of feeding a soul with wine and bread became obsolete in a faith that promised a different kind of salvation. The busy traffic of the Triclinium slowed to a halt. There were no more banquets on the stone benches, no more laughter echoing in the dining hall. The cushions were removed, or perhaps they were left to rot, their fabric disintegrating into grey dust in the damp air. The gods on the walls, Anubis and the Agathos diamond serpents, were left to stare into the dark. They had been carved to be seen, to be prayed to be acknowledged. Now they were stripped of their purpose. A god without a worshipper is just a carving. The magic drained out of the stone. The incense that used to burn before them, feeding them with its sweet smoke, was extinguished. The smell of frankincense and myrrh was replaced by the smell of wet limestone and salt. It was a cultural forgetting. Grandfathers stopped telling their grandsons about the tomb in the hill. The location was lost from the maps. The names of the families buried in the red granite sarcophagi were not just unread, they were unreadable. The language of their lives lost to the new order. The catacomb did not just close, it ceased to exist in the collective memory of the city. It became a rumor, then a myth, and then nothing. But before the final silence took hold, there must have been a last time. History does not record it, but our hearts can reconstruct it. There was a specific moment on a specific day when the last living human being stood in the Triclinium. Let us imagine a man, perhaps a descendant of the original founders, standing in the doorway of the dining hall in the year 300 or 350. He is alone. The old ways are dying, and he knows it. The city above is full of churches now, and the old temples are being shuttered. He has come out of a sense of duty, a nagging pull of blood, to pay respects to ancestors whose names he barely knows. He holds an oil lamp, the clay warm in his hand. The small flame fights a losing battle against the crushing weight of the shadows. He looks at the stone benches, empty and cold. He looks at the hole in the floor where the wine used to be poured. He has brought no wine today. He has brought only his memory. He feels the chill of the underworld seeping through his tunic. The silence is so deep it rings in his ears. He looks at the entrance to the inner burial chamber, past the serpent guardians. They look back at him with their stone eyes, waiting for a prayer he does not know how to speak. He realizes with a heavy heart that he does not belong here. This place belongs to a time that has finished. The coziness that his ancestors tried to build has evaporated. It is just a hole in the ground now. He turns around. His sandals scrape against the rock floor, a harsh, gritty sound that startles the stillness. He walks back to the spiral staircase. He begins the climb, up, past the rotunda, up towards the circle of light that is shrinking every year. At the top of the stairs he pauses. He looks back down into the throat of the shaft. The darkness is waiting, hungry and patient. He considers leaving the lamp, a final offering, but decides against it. He blows out the flame. The wick smokes for a moment, a thin grey ribbon curling into the air, smelling of burnt linen and oil. Then it is gone. He steps out into the blinding white heat of the Alexandrian sun. He walks away down the hill towards the bustling, changing city. He does not look back. And behind him, the silence rushes in to fill the space he left. It settles over the benches, over the serpents, over the bones of the soldiers and the horses. The great iron door of history swings shut. For the next 1,500 years, the only visitors will be the slow drips of water, the scuttling beetles, and the ghosts of 1,000 unspoken prayers. The Library of Whispers closes its book on Shoqafa, leaving it to sleep the long, dreamless sleep of the forgotten, until the stumble of a donkey wakes it once again. We rise now from the lowest depths, leaving the black mirror of the water and the rhythmic, hypnotic dripping of the cisterns behind us. We ascend the stairs, moving slowly up through the layers of time until we stand once again in the familiar shadows of the Triclinium, the hall of the Banquet. We have come full circle. We began here with the noise of the living, the clinking of cups and the breaking of bread. We return to it now in the silence of the aftermath. The room is exactly as we left it, yet it feels different. The air has settled. The ghosts of the mourners have retreated, leaving the space open for us. Stand here for a moment in the center of the U-shaped benches. The lantern light is low, casting long, soft shadows that stretch across the uneven floor. The atmosphere is no longer one of grief or desperate negotiation with the gods. It is an atmosphere of acceptance. Can you remember the scene we painted earlier? The colourful cushions, the smell of roasted meats, the spill of red wine. It is all gone. The organic materials have long since decayed, consumed by the patient hunger of the microbes and the damp air. What remains is the skeleton of the room, the stone bones. But the memory of that warmth still clings to the walls. It is a phantom sensation, like the feeling of a limb that has been removed. You can almost sense the vibration of the low conversations that took place here 2,000 years ago, the whispers of families comforting one another, the sighs of relief as they escaped the burning sun of Alexandria. This room was a sanctuary then, and it is a sanctuary now. It is a place that was designed to hold human emotion, to absorb it into the rock, so that the mourners could leave lighter than they arrived. Walk slowly towards one of the stone couches. The movement is effortless, as if you are floating through the heavy air. The darkness here is not threatening. It is a soft, velvet curtain that wraps around you, shutting out the glare and the noise of the waking world. Reach out your hand. We are going to perform the final sensory act of our journey. We are not looking or listening or smelling. We are feeling. Place your palm flat against the surface of the limestone bench. The first sensation is the texture. It is not polished like the marble of a palace. It is rough, gritty and honest. You can feel the tiny imperfections under your fingertips, the microscopic ridges and valleys of the sedimentary rock. This stone was once alive. Millions of years ago, a collection of shells and marine creatures on the floor of a prehistoric sea. Now it is solid, compressed by the weight of eons. It feels dry and dusty, a texture that speaks of immense age. But then the second sensation takes over. The temperature. It is cool. It is a deep, abiding coolness that has nothing to do with the weather above. The sun may be blazing on the surface, baking the streets of Alexandria until the air shimmers. But down here, the stone keeps its own counsel. It maintains a constant, unchanging chill. Focus on that feeling of cold against your warm skin. Imagine the heat of your body, the fever of your thoughts, the friction of your day, flowing out of your hand and into the rock. The stone accepts it. The stone is a vast, infinite heat sink. It absorbs your energy, your worry, and your noise, and it gives you nothing back but its own stillness. This is the cool breath of stone. It is a physical whisper that travels up your arm and settles in your chest. It slows the heart. It cools the blood. It reminds you that urgency is a temporary condition, but stillness is eternal. The ancient Egyptians believed that the West, the land of the setting sun, was the land of peace. They called the dead the Westerners. To join them was not a tragedy, but a rest. Standing here, with your hand on the cool bench where they once feasted, you can understand why. The tomb is not a place of horror. It is a place of suspension. It is a pause button pressed on the chaos of the universe. The soldiers in the hall of Caracalla have laid down their armor. The horses have stopped galloping. The master of the house has stopped his trading. The water in the cistern has stopped flowing. Everything here has come to a halt. And now the Library of Whispers offers this stillness to you. As you stand in the dark, touching the cool rock, the boundaries of the room seem to dissolve. The walls of the Triclinium expand until they encompass your own room, your own bed. The heavy, protective earth above the catacomb becomes the heavy, warm blanket over your shoulders. You are safe here. You are hidden. The Agathos diamond serpents are at the door, keeping the world at bay. The jackal Anubis is watching from the shadows, ensuring that no bad dreams can cross the threshold. You are held in the embrace of the mountain. There is no more history to learn today. There are no more dates to remember. There are no more symbols to decode. The intellectual work is done. The physical work is done. All that remains is the feeling of gravity, pulling you down gently towards the center of the earth. Let the coolness of the stone spread through you. Let it heavy your eyelids. The lantern is flickering, its oil running low. The flame is getting smaller, turning from a bright orange to a dull, sleepy red. The shadows are lengthening, merging, swallowing the room in a soft, comforting grey. The silence of the lower levels is rising up to meet you, that profound, watery silence we heard earlier. It wraps round your ankles, then your waist, then your shoulders. It is a tide of quiet. You are no longer a visitor in a tomb. You are a traveller finding rest in a way station. The banquet is over, and it is time to sleep. The stone does not demand anything from you. It only asks that you stop. It asks that you become like the rock, still, cool, and heavy. The whisper of the donkey has faded. The whisper of the chisel has stopped. The whisper of the water has slowed. Now there is only your own breath, slow and rhythmic, matching the deep, slow breathing of the earth itself. And so we turn the very final page of this ancient history. With a soft thud, I close the heavy leather cover, sealing the secrets of the catacombs inside. Until we meet again. The library is quiet now. The storm outside has quieted to a gentle rhythm, and the fire has burned down to warm, glowing embers. There is nothing left for you to do, no stone left unturned. You are safe, and it is time to rest. If you wish to find your way back to this sanctuary tomorrow, simply subscribe to our archives and perhaps leave a gentle like to keep the candle burning. But for now, let your eyes close, let the heaviness take over. Deep, restorative sleep. Good night, traveler, good night.